Morning, everyone, and thank you for the organisers for inviting me to what is a really stimulating conference. My apologies that I wasn't able to be here yesterday. So I'm going to continue on Emma's really well-made points on collaboration and talk about some of the ecosystems that we're developing around precision health and diagnostics. And if I have time, I'm going to also talk about a couple of companies that are advancing new technologies in this field and reflect, just picking up on Stuart's point on the innovative devices access pathway, just reflecting on our experiences, our positive experiences of being one of the 8 companies on that journey. So just moving on to highlighting the roles that I'm doing at the moment. So some of these are really around ecosystem development with the PHTA. I'm taking on the chair of the Clinical Immunology Services in a few weeks' time, and that will be very much around taking that organisation from having regional and national impact to looking to develop global partnerships and taking some of this really great British science that we have and working with partners around the globe to support advances. So I think for this audience, I don't need to say too much around precision medicine. I, some 10, 15 years ago, was leading what we called personalised medicine for Philips. And I think I went through 4 or 5 job titles in the first 6 months because we didn't know what to call it. It was companion diagnostics and so on. I think we're all settling now on precision medicine. I personally feel that precision health is more encompassing. And when we think about the work that we're developing in Birmingham, it goes beyond diagnostics, AI, and interventions to also consider the person's well-being and their lifestyle, and thinking more about moving towards proactive health and well-being, which has been a theme for me for many years. So just a show of hands, I'm interested to know how the marketing's going. Is anybody already familiar with the PHTA that will open in January next year? 1 or 2, yeah, a little bit. So I'll say a few words about that then. So it's part of a very significant initiative sponsored by the University of Birmingham. So just to show you, for those who don't know Birmingham, that's the capital of the world. We celebrated 200 years of making chocolate at Bourneville a few weeks ago. That's the Queen Elizabeth Hospital, which is one of the largest hospitals in Europe. I'm not sure why I've done that. Just those who've got keen eyes, you can see all of what I'm going to show. One of the largest hospitals in Europe and a very diverse population. 40% of the patients going to that hospital are of non-Caucasian ethnicity. We have the Women's and Children's, the new American hospital here. And this is all a, I think when I took that screen, yeah, I've realised. Yeah. So we'll do that. So this is all vendor. So this is the Birmingham Health Innovation Campus, a very significant initiative which will be developed over the next 7 or 8 years. The first building is the PHTA, and that will open in January, and much anticipated. It's around, and we're working very closely with Oxford and starting to work with Cambridge. It's around providing capability and also grow on space and capability for those companies that may have spun out of university and need that extra space and support like 3D printing, clinical trials and so forth. And I mentioned, just to show, and it does look like that, it's fitted out and finished. So nice big labs, a bit like this room with lots of natural lights. Many of you, I'm sure, like myself, have worked in diagnostics and been down in the basement, and this is really quite an upgrade from that. I'm not a property person, but it's a lovely place to work, or it will be. And some of the first residents will be Alex and the Clinical Immunology Service. I'll say a bit more about them, but also developing clinical trials and links into genomics. So, and there'll be more to follow on these groups that will be relocating into the facility and over the coming years into the other buildings that will be or started to be built already. So to say a little bit about, does anybody know about the Clinical Immunology Service? And we've just put an S on it to make it seem less sort of national. So I first worked with them nearly 40 years ago when I was doing my dissertation, and we were working, I sent to Dimitris on benchtone protein kappa and lambda light chains for myeloma, and that's been one of the success stories from the CIS. That's now one of the mainstays of the binding site that were acquired by Thermo a while ago. So what we do is a lot of the more esoteric testing, a lot of the pioneering work on COVID testing, more recently MPOX, and also providing a service to the NHS. And the plan there is to move this more towards, as I mentioned, global impact. I'm going to talk about antimicrobial resistance a little bit further, because that's a theme that is of significant concern. I'm sure many of you are aware of the problems we're having with the superbugs and the growing threats. One of my colleagues, Martha Clokey up at Leicester, has recently returned from India, and she was saying that 80% of all the tests that are going to microbiology are looking at urinary tract infections, UTIs, and many of these patients have resistance to most of the antibiotics, if not all, and that's a really serious threat, not just in India, but across the globe. So we're looking at how we can bring together not just microbiologists, but in the case of the immunology team, looking at developing new diagnostics, new interventions, and also ways to monitor the efficacy and safety of new interventions that will complement and replace antibiotics. And again, in my career, oncology has always been one of the, I guess, exemplars of precision medicine, but going forward, areas like antimicrobial resistance will very much be part of the vanguard. And just to say a little bit about that, so we're working with the CPI, the Centre for Process Innovation, who have a lot of expertise around scaling up and taking technologies. If any of you are not aware of the CPI, I can make some introductions for you. They're a really good group at technology translation and development to good manufacturing practice and so forth. We're working with them to establish capability in Birmingham to take some of these new interventions and diagnostics, including bacteriophage-based interventions. Some of you may know of phage as a really powerful tool in CRISPR and so forth. It's also now being recognised in its own right as a natural and powerful antibiotic. So we're looking to bring all of this together and start to address some of these microbiome challenges. And the way we're doing that, again, picking up on what Emma was saying, is through developing ecosystems. And you can see here, I haven't got time to go into detail, but we're taking research out of Birmingham, Leicester. We're talking to Joe Fothergill and the team up in Liverpool, helping to form and work with companies who have got diagnostics and therapeutics addressing antimicrobial resistance, and then looking at funding and support from government and investors and so forth, and also bringing international efforts to bear. So how many people are aware of bacteriophage, just as a quick question? So phage have been used for over 100 years, and the Eliava Institute in Georgia have celebrated their 102nd year working in this field. Their challenge is that they are in a part of the world that is close to Russia and quite a lot of risk of conflict and embargoes, but they've got tremendous expertise. What they don't have is, to the points that have been made earlier, accreditation to Western standards include in terms of standardization and regulatory and so on. So we're looking to take their knowledge and bring that and start to test it and bring it into the framework where we can start to develop diagnostics and therapies. And also working with the NHS to pull and then work with some of the big pharma companies to take these technologies into the broader markets. So, and we put the PHTA at the heart of that, but there will be other institutes and organisations that will be involved. And to that point, just to go into a little bit more detail, if we think about some of the areas of interest with AMR, it's not just human health. We've extended the scope to include One Health, so that's human, animal, and environment, and we're looking at diagnostics and therapeutics across aquaculture, farming, animal health. One of the big areas of concern and cost in NHS is diabetic foot infection. Urinary tract infection I mentioned, and cystic fibrosis, again, is a disease where the sufferers are very prone to infection and lack of robustness. So again, we're looking to put together initiatives working with MHRA and others to develop precision medicine solutions. And again, to then work with the NHS for validation. Doris, you'll remember when we worked in Amersham, we were able to work with the NHS and do that early validation in the UK that then enabled us to gather the evidence to go out and market our products in the rest of the world. And Amersham was an exemplar for that, and I'm very keen to bring together startups and mature companies to reinvigorate that. And I think, going back to what Stuart was saying and Emma, we have the opportunity now. One of the few perhaps benefits of Brexit is that we can start to develop proactive, effective and safe regulatory frameworks that we can then use to drive innovation very quickly in the UK and take that out to the global markets. I'm going to skip through this one pretty quickly because it's, on the face of it, is urine, and I know we're talking about blood today, but again, thinking about some of the smaller companies, we're looking to bring those together and start to inform interventions around AMR. I'm going to conclude by saying a few words about EarSwitch and the new standards that we're developing there. And for me, having come from vitro diagnostics, I find this very interesting. I was having a conversation with another David earlier about surface-enhanced Raman, and I did quite a lot of work on that some years ago with Strathclyde and Oxford, looking at this very specific tool for measuring biomarkers in vitro. With EarSwitch, we're actually looking at that tool as a remote sensor, but one that can be very accurate. The first thing we're doing here, and again, when I was with Philips, we didn't launch quite a few promising technologies because we found there was a skin color bias. So when we were looking at areas like heart rate monitoring and patient monitoring in general, we realized that different skin tone could impart a bias. And this has become really to the fore during the COVID crisis, where you may recall that people with darker skin tones often have poorer outcomes in COVID. And there's a lot of debate about the reason. One of the main reasons is that the standard of care, the standard diagnostic, which is pulse oximetry, the finger oximeter, is very flawed in people with darker skin. In fact, it's flawed in many people with poor perfusion and so forth. And so EarSwitch was founded by an NHS entrepreneur, Dr. Nick Gontes, GP of 30 years. He was very concerned about standard of care. As an aside, switching the technology around, it also enables communication with people with MND and cerebral palsy, but that's another story for another day. Nick was concerned about that, and he, like a true entrepreneur, got hold of some bits and pieces from online and built a rudimentary sensor. The company has subsequently taken that forward into a millimeter cubed device that can go into any hearing aid or hearing earbud. So it's tiny, easy to apply, off-the-shelf parts, and it can overcome some of the problems that we see in not just patient monitoring and diagnostics, but think about digital medtech informing the digital proposition. And again, I think Emma made the point about standards and the importance of that. We're working with groups like IBM who are trying to clean up poor data. And our argument is that if we can make that data as accurate and granular, continuous as possible, then we can better inform AI and indeed the way that that can be used to tailor better treatments. So, as I mentioned, we're looking at a core site. So the inner ear is very central. The thin skin that's in the inner ear and the eardrum is the same in everybody. So that immediately overcomes some of the problems with skin tone. And it also enables us to look at a new approach where, and again, we'll have to think very carefully about the patient safety and the regulations around this, but empowering patients to democratize data own their own data and use that as they wish. And this is I didn't have time to put on a device, but this is a live feed, and it's of the quality that you see in an ITU. So we're looking at heart rate variability, oxygen. We've got a surrogate for blood pressure, and we're looking at respiration rate here. So we can do this really easily in a whole variety of devices. I mentioned the IDAP program. That's been extremely important, and again, lots of collaboration. Every time Nick goes out travelling, he's currently in the States, he gathers more interest. So we're working with a whole range of organisations. Some of them would be more obvious in the field of clinical diagnostics and AI. Others we're working with VW, Volkswagen Group, for example, and they're very interested in the generation of cars after next and how the vehicle, and it may not always be moving, can become a controllable environment that will support health and well-being. And interestingly, VW, Volvo, others we've spoken to from that world see themselves as lifestyle and software companies in the future, not as automotive manufacturers. And we're working with their innovation teams to look at how we bring together some of these disparate areas. And I think this is really interesting, that for us in the room that come from the world of blood testing, it's a really, really exciting time. It's keeping me from retiring because there is more to do. And part of what I'm keen to do is to inspire the next generation and look at this open collaboration. And on that front, we're looking at connected and informed patient care. So cloud-based systems, digital twins. We're looking to bring in care providers and to inform care provision. So I think I'll wrap up there. I think just as a call to action, I'm like others have said today and others, we need to collaborate, bring people together in forums like the PHTA, but also, as I think Stuart was saying, there is a call out, a consultation on regulations. I would urge everybody to get involved with that and have a voice, because we can shape the future of this. Thank you.
Thank you, David, for that informative presentation. So if we do have questions for David, please can we just raise our hands? Okay.
What you were saying, I recently got a new car, so it's got more bells and whistles. Cars monitor if you have an accident now and call for assistance, or do you need assistance? It could be that they're monitoring drivers and sort of saying, maybe you should pull over if there's something wrong with your cars, so that you're at risk of having an impact.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, our first projects, and I'm not allowed to say much, but they're with Ducati and Audi Racing. And part of that is monitoring the drivers. And there's two parts to that. It's awareness if they're becoming ill, but also in the event of an accident, that the paramedics will have that live streaming data before they get there. I came across an accident a few weeks ago, and it was a Porsche, and there were 3 people in there, and one was staggering around and running away from the car, and there was a youngster in the back, and it's, which one of those, it might be the guy who's running away, and he may have a, internal, so if you've got that information being picked up. And interestingly, one of the first questions I asked BW Innovation was, are people going to wear in-ear devices when they're driving? Because I wouldn't. And we're also working with Sony, for example, and the next generation of wearables in the ear are becoming here through, and the expectation is that people will wear them a lot more of the time. And compared to other forms, you might remember the ill-fated Google Glass, the ear is seen as being a really accessible point. And again, looking at what's happening in hearing aids, you may have seen that Apple are getting into that field. They're not very good yet, but it won't be just older people and people seen as deaf who wear hearing aids. It's coming down to younger people and optimizing their auditory experience, whether they're being in a concert or if they're having a conversation. These little devices, which will become really small and very wearable, will be tuning in that experience to really help with optimizing whatever you're doing at the time. So yeah, it's interesting where that's going, actually. It's moving very quickly.
Any other questions?
Yeah.
You've got the Ipswich Cloud, we obviously take on data in. how, biasing the question slightly, but how complex is it to make sure that you want to use that data, have access to it? You connect to their APIs, using your APIs, how does that work with this?
We're actually working with IBM on that one and linking into what they've already got. So again, it's around collaboration and making sure we've got the right safeguards and so forth. That project's quite early, so I can't go into too much detail yet, but again, we wouldn't have the audacity to try and do all that on our own. But you know, what we want to do is make sure we've got the branding around it. So it'll be linking into a lot of what's being developed. And to be honest, we're not restricting ourselves to IBM. We want to make a lot of these tools really open access as much as possible, actually. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yes.
Very interesting. I'm wondering if there's more time here, and this be used.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're just, and in fact, I didn't say, but on the IDAP program, we just received MHLA clearance, letter of no objection, so we can start clinical trials. And we look at anything from ITU monitoring to asthmatics, young asthmatics in the home. One of the challenges we've got, we're quite small, but we've got quite a lot of things going on. But the first applications will be more in the clinical setting, absolutely. Thank you. Okay, thank you, everybody.